something set me off, and I'm sure it was something little. My kids were young at the time. They were probably bickering or fighting or something, and I lost it. And I started pounding on this bag of Cheetos out of frustration as they're standing there, Mommy, please stop, because it was a treasured junk food. And that's when I realized, okay, I'm feeling out of control, and I need to do something about it.
Hello, this is Dr. Ned Hallowell, and welcome to Distraction. Today, I have the great pleasure of welcoming an author, which I always love to do. This woman has written a book called Goodbye Anxiety, Hello Freedom. Isn't that a wonderful title? Her name is Stephanie Dalfonzo. And I won't waste any more time with introduction. I'll just simply welcome Stephanie to Distraction.
Thank you so much, Ned. I'm really very happy to be here today. Thank you so much. So
tell us about you and tell us about your book.
Well, the book is Goodbye Anxiety, Hello Freedom. And it's truly about not just, quote unquote, managing or coping with anxiety. It's truly getting to the other side of it. And it was born out of my own experience. I was in my mid-30s before I had a now infamous Cheetos incident, which you can read about in the book. And I didn't realize until then that I had been struggling with anxiety my entire life. There was this constant, going on in the background and all the what ifs and worrying. And, I didn't know it was anxiety until it tipped into insomnia. And anyone who's ever experienced insomnia, it's debilitating. And so I did what most people do, and I went to the doctor, and I got a prescription. And it worked for a short time, and then it didn't work anymore. And I realized that was just a Band-Aid. I had to get under, what is this thing, anxiety? And how do I get relief, but not from a pill? And so I began doing the research, and, over 20 years later, I pulled it together into this very simple, it's a very thin book, and it's purposely very thin because simple shifts are what create lasting change.
For 20 years, you've been looking into this.
Yeah, over 20 years. So if you think back, this was the mid-'90s when this insomnia hit me. So the internet was brand new. We didn't have Google. So I was old school. I was going to the library and, trying to find books and magazines. And do you remember cassette tapes then? I was trying to find, information. But at that point, there really wasn't an awful lot of research. So, I found what I could, but then I have this insatiable desire to learn more and more. And now neuroscience is proving, what I've been saying about how when we can start interrupting the patterns, because we've gotten into these habituated patterns of reacting, we can't control what goes on around us, right? So we are still wired the way we were when we were back in the caves with this fight or flight syndrome, which is very good in certain situations. But in the society that we live in now, we're constantly looking for those saber-toothed tigers that are coming after us. We're on our phones and our devices 24/7, and it's like we are constantly activating that fight or flight system, and that's flooding all the stress hormones through our body. So we've begun these habituated patterns. My strong stance is, because it's in my own life, but also with thousands of clients now, that when we begin to build up these simple strategies that I outline in the book, when we have a couple of these that we weave in and out of everyday life, that's how we overcome anxiety, because then our habituated response begins to be, when I respond, I can stop, think, and then respond instead of that automatic reaction.
Now, you say thousands of clients. Are you a professional?
I had a hypnosis practice for 10 years, and I have closed that office now because, what I do is so much more than hypnosis.
But you're not a social worker or a psychologist or something like that?
No, I'm not a mental health professional. I am a hypnotist, neuro-linguistic programming, a lot of complementary approaches. And I remember an 8-year-old boy whose mother came and said, the school was bantering around some labels, and she didn't want to put him on medication. And this poor child, he was so hyper when he came in. And I taught him just this one simple technique and then had him smell some lemon essential oil. And inside of 5 minutes, the young boy was now snuggled up under a blanket, sucking his thumb.
That's wonderful. So what are some of your leading tips and treatments and methods for someone who really is a chronic worrier?
So something that's so simple is I usually, when I do this in person, I have a tennis ball in my hand, and I, toss the tennis ball from your left hand to your right hand, back and forth, back and forth. And if you just do that now with me, Ned, and your listeners, as long as you're not driving, just put your hands together in front of your heart and swing one hand out and back, the other hand out and back, out and back, out and back. And you'll begin to feel things start to calm down a little bit. And the reason that this works is because we're activating both sides of the brain. So we're activating both the left side and the right side of the brain, and it's telling us, oh, now it's time to just calm down. Like, that's so simple, and it doesn't have to be complicated. I did this, I don't know why, when my son was graduating from high school. I was very anxious, and I don't know why, and I didn't have a tennis ball with me. I had one of his lacrosse balls, which is really a very thick and heavy ball. And so because I was nervous, I'm tossing it back and forth, dropping it, and it's going thud, thud, thud down the metal bleachers. So I recommend a tennis ball instead.
What are some others? You say you've got more than 35 methods.
Yes, one of my clients' favorites is called square breathing. And if you just do this with me, imagine that you can write a square on the desk or in front of you or on a piece of paper. And I'll explain it first, and then I'll guide you through it. You start with your finger in the upper left-hand corner of the square, and as you trace it across the top, you're breathing in to the count of 4. Then as you go down the outside, you're holding your breath to the count of 4. Then along the bottom, you exhale to the count of 4. And then when you come back up, the left side of the square, you're holding to the count of 4. And you do this several times. And the reason that this works so well is most of us, for our entire lives, we've breathed in and out and in and out. And so we're doing a pattern interrupt with that holding the breath. And so again, it's giving a different signal from our brain down to the rest of our body saying, oh, okay, we're doing something different. Let's calm down.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you find that there are different types of anxiety?
Oh, yes. Yes, and it's really interesting because somebody asked me recently, is all stress and anxiety bad? And it's not, because if you think of, when I said I was feeling anxious when my son was graduating from high school, I was so excited, and I was not worried about something, but I was feeling anxious. And a bride on her wedding day may feel anxious. And then there's the what if train. I have found that we get into that habituated thinking of, what if? We always, focusing on, what might happen. And I used to do that. I used to do that all the time. And my husband and I have been married for 34 years. And so he's lost many jobs over the years. And he would come home, the poor man, he's already experiencing angst from losing his job. Then he'd come home to me, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Are we going to lose the house? And what if? And then finally one time he came home, and he came home to a loving wife who put her arms around him and said, okay, we'll work it out. We'll get through this together. And I didn't change him. That's something that, many of us, when we're trapped in that cycle of anxiety, we think it's the other person. And so we're trying to change them when it's really, we've got to be looking them back in the mirror.
Right. If you don't worry at all, we call that denial, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So the complete absence of anxiety is dangerous in its own right. So what are different types of anxiety?
Well, it's really in some ways it's a catch-all, because people will use stress and anxiety, interchangeably. And if you look at now, I was at workshop a couple of years ago with Tony Fadell, who was the inventor of the iPod and the first couple of generations of the iPhone. And he said that these devices are intentionally meant to be addictive, and that when you're swiping down on the screen, it's like pulling that lever on the slot machine. And so he talks about how these devices are bringing a lot more stress and anxiety into our society. And if we look at children, teens, and young adults are experiencing crisis levels of stress and anxiety now. College campuses cannot give enough resources to help the amount of students who are clamoring for it. And so part of my response to that is I've said for years we need to be teaching kids how to deal with their emotions in a healthy way. So for my book, I model Tom's shoes and Bombas socks, that for every book I sell, I donate one back to a school or organization that will teach the kids how to emotionally regulate themselves. Because, anxious parents have anxious kids. I know that from my personal experience and from, all my clients, that we take on our parents' anxiety. So I can think of like an adult cop years ago who came to me in my hypnosis practice. He had developed this, fear of driving on highways. And it came from one of his parents having an anxiety attack, a panic attack while driving, and they had to pull over to the side of the road. So we got to that core issue, did the healing work around it, and then he was able to go about his life again. So for your listeners who don't know what we're talking about, it's the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, also called ACEs. And it was a huge research. I was like, the research, this was like 17,000 people. So it's this strong body of research where they asked 10 questions. Did this happen to you in your childhood? And it's, emotional abuse, sexual abuse.
A lot of bad stuff, right. Yeah.
Right. And the higher you score on that, the more likely you are to experience depression, suicide attempts, heart disease, addictions as adults. So it's not, when Oprah, right before my book published last year, Oprah was on 60 Minutes talking about this. And I was so excited to see her bringing this to a national audience. And she said, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. And anxiety is often a reaction to what happened to you.
Yes. And so this is why I'm so passionate about helping children, because, you and I both know from firsthand experience, what happens in childhood doesn't stay in childhood.
No, absolutely. And the good news that you're spreading is that whatever it is, you can find ways of turning it into something that's positive.
Yes, and, people have to want to change. And I think why I was so excited that Oprah came out on 60 Minutes talking about this was it shined a light. It gave hope to people who may have otherwise just thought, all right, this is the way it is, and I can't do anything about it. And here's Oprah saying, oh, yes, you can.
Well, and that's the message of your book, practical strategies, correct? Many of them. Yes.
And I share my story in there because, I don't want to be perceived as, holding myself out as, I'm the expert. I know this. It's like, hi, I've been there. I've gotten to the other side of it. Let me give you a hand and let me help you get there. But, if you have a high ACEs score, I'm not suggesting that reading my book and doing some of these things is going to take care of that. Because when you have deep-seated trauma, you need somebody to help you get to that and heal it. Have somebody help you do the healing work. Like I just got off a call right before we got on with a new client. And I said, okay, we do the healing work together. And then you have to do in between, you have to do these techniques. It's not like, you go and work on healing the trauma and then, because life is going to keep throwing you curveballs. The reason I have 35 different techniques in the book is because one size doesn't fit all. Find 3 or 4 of them that work for you, weave them into everyday life, and you will find more peace, more calm, more balance in your life.
Right. Now, at the beginning, you mentioned a story about, was it nachos or Kringles? What was it?
Cheetos.
Cheetos. Yeah.
So my defining moment for this was something set me off, and I'm sure it was something little. My kids were young at the time. They were probably bickering or fighting or something, and I lost it. And I started pounding on this bag of Cheetos out of frustration as they're standing there, Mommy, please stop, because it was treasured junk food. And that's when I realized, okay, I'm feeling out of control, and I need to do something about it. And this is not, trust me, no, this is not like, ooh, let me tell you my shining moment of my life. It's actually pretty embarrassing. But I share it because people go, oh, I'm not alone. I think that all of us experience at some point in our lives when we're like, ooh, all right, I'm out of control. I need to do something about this. And so, again, I don't share it like saying, oh, I'm really proud of this. I'm not. But it allowed me to turn things around. And do I ever experience anxiety and stress now? Of course I do. It's part of the human condition. I know now when it starts to come up, oh, I can do this breath technique and calm things down again.
And feeling more in control and less vulnerable.
Yes.
That in and of itself is a great way to deal with anxiety, just knowing you can control it and it won't overpower you.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring up the control because during the Cheetos time, I kept an immaculate house because it was the one thing I felt like I could control. And now no apologies, I don't keep an immaculate house. But, we think we can control things, and it's just an illusion because it's that fight or flight system that's in control. That's like that alarm system going wah, wah, wah. So instead, we want to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. A really simple way of doing that, Ned, is to yawn. Again, with this new client I just started with earlier today, she started yawning and she's covering her mouth with her hand. I'm like, no, I want you to yawn because when we yawn, we stimulate the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in the body, and it goes from our brain all the way down into our abdomen, wrapping around all of our internal organs. And so it's that, rest and digest signal. And the more we can activate that, the less the automatic wah, wah is going to keep going off.
Mm-hmm. You're just saying yawn just stimulated a yawn response in me.
Yes.
And it's not that you're boring. I just yawned, and I find you very interesting. So it's a misconception that when you yawn you're bored. It's not true at all.
It doesn't matter if it's an involuntary yawn or if it's just. You still get the same response.
Yeah, it's a very friendly kind of thing to do. Dogs do it all the time, and they're the friendliest things in the world.
Right. And you know what another thing that dogs and other animals do that we as humans don't, as a rule, is they shake it off. If you see an animal in flight, right, they get to where they're safe and they shake it off. And so that's one of the things that I talk about in the book is literally shake it off. You can just shake it, whether it's, just standing up and shaking your whole body or shake it as far as dancing. But that physical movement can, again, trip the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah. This is wonderful. This is really wonderful. You're a wise lady with a lot of practical tips, and you've written a wonderful book.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Goodbye
Anxiety, Hello Freedom. That's just wonderful. You've written a wonderful, helpful book that will be a treasure for an awful lot of people, because there are an awful lot of people who really are imprisoned by anxiety and worry, and your book is one book that can help set them free. Thank you so much for joining us. You're a pleasure to talk to you. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm sure our listeners have as well.
Thank you so much. Now, if I can just say, if your listeners would like to get 5 of the techniques from my book, they can go to 5easywaystocalmanxiety.com and download 5 of the techniques right out of the book.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ned.
Goodbye, anxiety. Hello, freedom. Stephanie Dalfonzo, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ned.